Twitchell's Book 1, Dwindling Magic. Written and read by T.D.L. White. Chapter 8. Crossing Wires. The empty room seemed much smaller now that there were 4 of them, plus a dog inside, all standing under the yellow light of the single bare bulb. Nick was in some kind of trouble with the others, but he had no idea about any book, and he didn't know why they thought he'd taken it. He wasn't interested in books. His main concern was that they'd somehow found out about his latest hacking activity. "What's in your bag?" James asked sharply. Cece was nestled under his left arm, its fur looking more dishevelled than ever. Made him look like a cut-price Bond villain. "If you haven't got the book, prove it." Nick hesitated and looked at Jenny and Elf. Neither offered him a way out. "See," James said, "he's hiding something." Jenny rolled up her sleeves. It was then that Nick noticed that none of them were wearing school uniform. No gowns in sight. "I'm not hiding anything," Nick said. "It's just my laptop." He took his bag off and showed them. "The bag's not big enough to hold the book," Jenny said. "He doesn't have it on him." "Then where is it?" James demanded. "Where have you put it?" Nick didn't know what to say. "I don't know anything about your book," he managed. "Why were you spying on us?" Jenny said. "Looking in this room. Did the inspector put you up to this?" Nick didn't know what to say. Elf wandered over to the window. "We don't know it was him." She didn't sound very convinced. Sounded more like she thought it was him. "I just heard voices the other night," Nick said, "but the room was empty." "Yeah, well that sounds like spying to me." James looked at Jenny and Elf. "He turns up, he's not on the list, they put him in my room, and the next thing we know the book gets taken. What are the chances that that's a coincidence?" "You're my roommate?" Nick asked. "Nothing is a coincidence with the inspector," Jenny said, ignoring the question. At least she sounded more calm now. "He mentioned a crow during lunch today." "I already told you, he's not on the list," James said again, throwing up his arms in frustration. "It's the first thing I checked." "The list isn't complete," Elf said. "It's only places the circus went. And everything after the ringmaster died wouldn't be recorded. And the crow is something. I mean, he's not here for his academic brilliance." Nick looked at his feet. "So, the crow." Jenny's eyebrows raised a little. Her face was otherwise unmoved as she looked right at Nick, who continued to stare at the floor. "Start with that." "What do you want to know?" Nick asked quietly, grateful that James wasn't still ranting at him, but concerned that talking about the crow wouldn't make things better. James threw up his arms again, about to say something, but Jenny jumped in first. "You said it's why you're here at Twitchell's. Did it ask you to do something, or get you involved in something bad?" Did it ask him to do something? Nick wasn't sure he'd heard right. He was still thinking about how the SS Tag geolocator software had said they were all in Brighton. One night while I was working on my laptop, I looked round and it was watching me through the window. A big black thing. I didn't think it was real at first." "And did it speak to you?" Jenny said. Nick had a realization. This must be some kind of school prank they played on the new kids. He looked at the other 2, expecting to see them hiding smiles, but they were both playing along. James was now looking more expectant than angry. "No, it didn't talk. I tried to shoo it away, but it just kept watching. It gave me the creeps, so I opened the window to get rid of it. But my windows don't open all the way, so it just kind of shuffled to the side and held out something in its talons." "Claws," James corrected. "Crows aren't raptors. They have claws." "Yeah, well, it held out its claws and dropped a memory card into my hand." He checked their faces, all listening carefully. "Then it flew off." What was on the memory card? James asked, not a hint of disbelief in his voice. Well, I'd been researching some software vulnerabilities and asking some questions, on forums. And what I really needed was access to a special forum that was invite only. And that's what the crow gave me. An invitation to a special online forum, Jenny said. Nick nodded. So the animal helped you, Elf said. That's a first. You're lucky it didn't drag you into some petty battle with foxes or bats or something. So a crow gave him an invitation, James said. So what? That doesn't mean he's not working for the inspector. I'm not, Nick said. Really. I'm not even going to stay here. I'm leaving Twitchell's on Friday, as soon as they let me. I'm going home. I can't stand it here. You're leaving Twitchell's, Jenny said. But you only just started. And it's one of the best schools in the country, and you're here for free. Why would you leave? Nick didn't know where to start. That he wasn't a good student, didn't want to leave his granddad on his own, needed to get back to fix his hacked servers, he wanted more internet time. The list went on. Well, it's not the food, James said. Food's great at Twitchell's. Not that you eat it, Nick said. You don't even sleep here. Where do I sleep? James asked. In Bright... Nick stopped himself, then decided it didn't matter. He'd never see these people again after Friday. In Brighton. And you were there just a few minutes ago, and now you're here and it doesn't make sense, but I don't care either way, because I'm leaving. See? James raised his voice, but again Jenny cut him off. How did you know where we were, she asked, if you're not working for the inspector? Suddenly, Nick's earlier fears about being caught hacking came back. He wouldn't risk mentioning anything about his servers. It was one thing never seeing these three again. It was another letting them know something that could incriminate him in the future. And he'd planned on keeping his access open to the Twitchell's network even after he was home. Never hurt to have a few extra machines under his control. See? James jumped in on the silence. This time nobody stopped him. Just because a crow got him into some secret online forum doesn't mean he's not working with the inspector. And we've only got his word for it. I bet he's lying about... I'm not lying, Nick said, squaring up to the older but shorter boy, who went quiet. You three and two others were in Brighton, and you somehow got back to Twitchell's in minutes, which isn't possible, by the way. I think that you're the liars, but I guess we'll never know. I don't have your book. I don't even know what you're talking about. He turned around to leave, but Elf stepped in his way. It wasn't an aggressive move, and she moved back once he slowed, as if to let him go. Who were the other two? She asked softly. Nick grabbed the handle. He'd had enough of this interrogation. Then he sighed. N. Sokolov and H. Sullivan. He left the room and walked fast down the corridor, heart beating hard, wondering if they'd come after him. Rather than go to his room, which was also James's room, he went back to the common room. The drinks and snacks were still out, so he made a cup of tea and sat in his armchair, holding the delicate teacup with both hands. He was buzzing again, but not the same feeling as after the hack. This time he was angry. How had they made it back from Brighton to Twitchell so fast? Why did they ask him if the crow could talk? How come they didn't think that the crow giving him a memory card was crazy? It was crazy, and he still didn't believe it had happened. But they believed it straight away. And why were they worried about the inspector spying on them? Whatever they were doing, Nick suspected that it was just as bad as his network hacking. They probably wouldn't have cared about his little foray into Twitchell's network at all, not if there wasn't a talking bird involved. He sipped his tea until he'd calmed down. All the stuff about the inspector and the crow could wait. As for them magically appearing back in Twitchell's, that was probably a glitch in the badge tracking software. He'd only used it for a couple of minutes, so it wasn't impossible he'd changed the scale on the map and not the data. And there could easily be a time lag that he hadn't noticed. Still, he was pretty good at using software, and James, Jenny and Elf all acted like they'd just been in Brighton. Most of the other students had left the common room. It was not long before bedtime. Nick was tired himself. He finished the tea and balanced a cup on the arm of the chair, in a spot that looked like a lot of other cups had been balanced over the years, judging by the pattern of stains. He checked his phone and saw a reminder at the top of the screen. He groaned out loud. With all the network exploits distracting him during his hour of connectivity, he'd totally forgotten to order his granddad's shopping again. To simply wait until the next day's Wi-Fi would likely add 2 extra days to the delivery time, as the delivery slots for Saturday would all be gone, and the Sunday slots cost loads extra. Nick debated whether to just hang on till tomorrow and pay for a Sunday slot. But even then, that would mean his granddad would have to wait a whole day without supplies. In reality, it wasn't that bad, and his granddad could go out and buy himself anything that he'd completely run out of. Might even do him some good. But Nick wasn't thinking logically. Twitchell's stupid policy wasn't going to inconvenience his granddad even a tiny bit. Nick was going to find a way to order the shopping. He went through his options. There was a network cable in the library, but the library was probably closed and his laptop didn't have an Ethernet port built in. He hadn't thought to bring a converter with him. If he could get into the library, he might be able to use the old computer in the office there. With about half an hour left until the official lights out time, it was worth a shot. The college was deserted, and after the first corridor connecting to the house, it was dark too. The lights, however, did not stay off. They were either motion activated or connected to the same system as the doors. Each time he entered a new section of hallway, the lighting panels high up near the ceiling hummed into life, bathing Nick in a soft white light. Alone at night, the hum of the lights and the click of his shoes on the spotless floor was surely loud enough to let any teachers know that a student was up to no good. Once, after turning a corner, he thought he heard a light scratching noise behind him, but when he looked back he saw nothing. Each door he went through would be logging his presence, and that SS Tag geolocator server would be recording his location to the nearest centimetre. Whether the rules forbade entry to the college after prep time or not, Nick didn't care. The doors were compliant enough, all the way until he reached the library, where the door denied him access when he pushed it. So much for the easy way. Time to try something a little riskier. This podcast was brought to you by me, TDL White. I'll be reading a chapter a week until it's complete.